Good morning, everybody. Brian Neubert here from goldenblack.com, live in the Palace once again. This is your goldenblack.com Daily Quarantine Simulcast for Wednesday, May 27th. It is brought to you by Falls Purdue Bookstores, Purdue Federal Credit Union, the 6th Street Dive Restaurant, First Source Bank, East End Grill, and the Chargers Team Remax Ability Plus. Want to remind you once again, if you're looking for a hell of a dinner, do I have my voice? If you're looking for a hell of a dinner or simply to support our local businesses, specifically the restaurants, through this very difficult time in our history, please keep in mind the 6th Street Dive in Lafayette, the East End Grill in Lafayette, Arnie's in Lafayette, West Lafayette, and all over the state, Bruno's on the Levee, and Triple X on the Hill. I'm sure they'd love to hear from you. We greatly appreciate it if you would support people who've been good to us. And with that being said, we will move on. If you're accessing this video on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel if you'd be so kind at some point in time. Once again, the world will start to spin again, and you will want our stuff coming across your YouTube feed promptly, preferably. This has been a struggle coming up with topics every day to discuss here on our little daily Purdue conversation to help hopefully give you a little bit to listen to in quarantine if you're in quarantine. I understand that's not everybody's reality, and I don't take that lightly. But we have had some questions over the last few months, and I don't know if this is going to be interesting to anyone or not, but I'm just punching a time clock here. We had a question a while back asking me, about how much recruiting has changed over the years and what that has meant for actually covering recruiting, how much covering recruiting as a media entity is different now than it was years ago. And again, I don't know if anybody's going to find this interesting, but once again, I'm just making appearances here. I'm just needing a topic every day. So I picked that one out and I figured I would talk for 8 to 10 minutes about that. It's changed 100%. That is simply the best way I can put it. It is an entirely different game nowadays than it was, back when I started 1,000 years ago. Obviously, I'm one of the old guard now in this business, which actually blows my mind. But that is the reality. I've been doing this 15 to 20 years, however long it's been, and it is entirely, much like everything else about my job. I started my job when we had a print magazine, and that was all we did. And I don't even remember what I did in the summer. I have no idea what I did. That was too long ago. I barely remember yesterday, let alone 2001. But that was, I have no idea. But everything has changed in the particular job I have, and recruiting is an entirely different deal than it was then. The reasons for that are many. One, social media. Obviously, kids nowadays control their own information. Which is fine. I mean, that it is their information. That's just the simple reality of the day. That takes a lot of burden off of people like me to actually find out what's going on before other people, which is the stupid little rat race we all used to play. Now we just kind of let kids, not let them, but wait for them to announce the various benchmarks in their process, and then we cover it accordingly, we analyze it, we do this, we do that, whatever. So that's probably the biggest change. The second biggest change, and this is probably 1A to 1B, is the fact that there's so many more people doing this nowadays. This is really big business. The internet network hierarchy has split and resplit and split again a few dozen times now, it feels like. And every time it does, more and more websites crop up, more and more independent websites have cropped up, more and more blogs have cropped up. That's the nature of modern media proliferation. And with it comes more and more people covering this stuff, meaning every time Joe Blow in Chicagoland gets an offer from so-and-so school, it's not one site calling him anymore to do a story about that. It's 5, and it's 3 blogs, and it's however many fans are now covering recruiting, which is a powder keg if there ever was a powder keg. But the reality is that there are just more people covering this stuff, and these players are more accessible than they ever have been because of social media. Anybody can send a direct message to anybody. online. That is a powder keg also, but that is also the reality of it. There are no barriers anymore to covering recruiting. Not that there ever were all that many in the first place, but you had to be part of a media organization that had access to, a certain database of contact information to be able to call recruits. The third biggest change is the fact that these guys are more, shall we say, media savvy than they've ever been. This is when you're the first person covering something, you have it all to yourself. People want to talk to you. People, are willing to tell you things. That's where, when I first started covering basketball recruiting, going to AAU tournaments and whatnot, people wanted to talk to me because I was the only one there covering it, or one of only a handful of people there covering it. I don't want to pretend like I was the first person. I invented covering basketball recruiting. I most certainly did not. There were a lot of really good people who came long before me. But the point is, there were only 3 or 4 of us, basically in my sphere, kind of doing it. And what that meant was people wanted to talk to you, wanted to tell you things. We're happy to see you there. I mean, I still have that. There's still that sort of dynamic nowadays, but it's with the people you've gotten to know really well, who have gotten to know you really well. But back then, that's the way it was with everybody, because media attention was something people sought out, as opposed to nowadays where there's 200 of us at the same event, and the shoe companies who run their events have to manage it and have to keep us at a distance from people, which is unfortunate for everybody in some cases, because these are exposure events for a reason. But can't blame them, because the magnitude of all of this is getting just crazy. So that's kind of where the biggest differences lie. I think the days of us doing the phone call, hey, what do you think of the offer? Who do you like? What's your plan here? I think that's going by the wayside, because it's pointless. It is a waste of my time. It is a waste of their time. It's probably a waste of your time. We do it anyway because people seem to like it, but I don't know if anything's coming out of it, because kids nowadays, with some exceptions, don't really say anything interesting because they're so numbed to the onslaught, in most cases, of media coverage, that it just doesn't seem worth it anymore. We are trying to move away from it. It just so happens quarantine has left me personally with time on my hands, so I've done more of it this spring than I probably would have preferred to, but still not as much as a lot of other people do. What I've tried to do personally, I think this is the way we all need to go, is more and more about analysis, more and more about big picture stuff, like, hey, here are the people Purdue wants at this position. Here's what it means if they get them. Here's why they need them. Here's what their position looks like. I think that stuff is way more valuable to the reader personally than a kid giving me an empty comment about how Purdue's definitely up at the top of his list without specifying what exactly that means, when his list could have 700 schools on it. That happens. I mean, there are kids out there who publicize list cuttings that aren't list cuttings; they're list listings. So I try to avoid things that I would call artificial manufactured news. If something doesn't seem significant, I don't really cover it. We have always tried to be not to toot our own horn here, I've always tried to be as non-intrusive to the process as possible. If I know a kid's coming to Purdue and he's going to announce that on a certain date, I don't really tell you that's happening. I might hint at it and whatnot, but I let the kid have his day. I try not to be a pain in the kid's ass. I try not to. If the kid doesn't want to talk to me, he doesn't want to talk to me. That's fine. That's his right. But I also want to make sure that a kid knows that I'm trying to get a hold of him, because nowadays I might text message a kid and say, hey, do you have 5 minutes at some point at your convenience to talk to me? And I might be one of 600 text messages he got that day. Not just from media, but from friends, from family, whoever. These kids are social beings. They are busy people. They are busier than ever. These kids work hard. They train a lot. Obviously, they have school to tend to, and I shouldn't be their priority. People like me should not be their priority. We should not take away from their homework time. They should not prioritize talking to us when there might be like 7 of us trying to get a hold of them at any one point in time. That should not be their priority. Their priority should be improving at their sport, taking care of their classwork, spending time with their family, spending time with their friends, getting time to be kids. Football recruiting, I can say, is very much going the way of basketball recruiting. What I mean by that is it's more event driven than it used to be. The numbers never really allowed that to happen because basketball, you can have 200 of the best players in the country under the same roof in July very reasonably. Football, there are 100 times the amount of kids playing football. Probably that's a very unscientific number, but that is the reality. Is that there are way more players, way more prospects, and that's why the football recruiting operation is much bigger than it is in basketball recruiting. Same things, exact same deal, covering it. Basketball recruiting, I can speak for myself here, covering it is done in June, July, May, and April. I know those months are out of order, but just bear with me here. Whereas football recruiting historically has been done more during the season. I think now it's becoming a deal where so many kids are going to camps, combines, whether it's our rivals camps, whether it's 7-on-7 tournaments, whether it's the things Nike runs, ESPN, whoever it may be, who runs these massive. Under Armour runs a camp and combine series. The offseason is becoming more and more about in-person coverage in football recruiting than it used to in basketball recruiting. I have always put a significant emphasis on seeing players in person. Personally, in football recruiting, going out during the season and seeing the players Purdue is recruiting. In basketball, obviously going out, traveling 12 to 13 days out of July, a bunch of times in June, a bunch of times in May and April, usually flying somewhere during the evaluation period to try to see these guys in person the best I can. I want to see them so I can give you an educated opinion and assessment of what they are, but also B, so that they know me, so they and their people know me, so that when it comes to a point in time where I need to call somebody for them to tell me something, I'm not some rando just calling up out of the blue. That stuff matters. That stuff matters in journalism, period. I don't necessarily consider what I do journalism. It's not like I'm covering the White House here. It's not like I'm covering, something important. I cover high school kids' decisions on what colleges they're going to. It's peak irrelevance in the grand scheme of things, but it is important in journalism for the people you cover to know you personally. That's always been my opinion anyway. So that's kind of why we put an emphasis on in-person coverage. Again, football is going that way, much more that way, the same way basketball has been for many, many years. So everything I just listed is basically the exact opposite of what it was 10 to 12 years ago. I think that this is a really big business. I think a lot of people are making money off these dudes. We don't take that lightly. Again, we try to be as ethical and non-intrusive about things as we possibly can. I understand if a kid doesn't want to talk to me, I'm not going to call him every 5 minutes. So that's kind of the way we've sort of always done things, but we've had to evolve as the process has evolved. I personally think, again, there's way more value in me watching a kid's huddle tape, which I'm going to start doing next week on all of Purdue's commitments and targets. Watch their video, apply my decade and a half of experience, whatever I know about football, whatever I know about basketball, whatever it may be, and then telling you what I think stands out about this player. Give him a better idea of what he is, what I think he is, what I think he means to Purdue, where he fits, why he fits, things like that. I think there's much more value in that nowadays than me calling up a kid and him mindlessly saying, I'm just looking for the best fit for me, So that's kind of where we are covering recruiting. It's always been kind of our thing. It's always been the thing for websites like ours. It's always been an important part of our coverage. That's never going to change. We have had to evolve over the years as the landscape has evolved, and that's just kind of part of the natural evolution of things nowadays in this media world we all kind of live in. So once again, I don't know if any of you found that interesting, but I did see that on my list of topics and said, you know what? I am just desperate enough on this Wednesday afternoon to go that route. So that's what I got for today. Your goldenblack.com Daily Quarantine Simulcast brought to you by Fox Purdue Bookstores, Purdue Federal Credit Union, the 6th Street Dive Restaurant, First Source Bank, East End Grill, and the Charters Team Remax Ability Plus. Need to remind you once again, if you're looking for a great meal or simply to support our local businesses as they hopefully phase out of this very difficult time in their history, please keep in mind the 6th Street Dive, East End Grill, Arnie's, Bruno's, and the Whitaker Inn. Also, if you're interested in this recruiting stuff, obviously we have recruiting coverage all over our website. Please be sure to check out goldenblock.com. We do have a 40-day free trial offer that we've apparently been offering for months that I've simply spaced out on. But we do have a 40-day free trial that you can find on our website. If you have any questions about that or whatever, feel free to email me at bneubert@goldenblock.com. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you tomorrow.